You cannot hear me. Now you can hear me, I hope. Let me know in the chat, which I will go look at. I'm trying to figure out how to arrange my screen today, since I may also have to look at things on my screen. I'll do it like this and just move my head if I need to. Looks like Quindy can hear me and see me, or I imagine she would have mentioned if she was not able to do one or the other. So happy to be back. Feels like it's been a long time. I've been kind of intermittent lately. Partly, the back problem thing continues, and partly we were going on vacation. So I had like preparations, and then I didn't want to stress my back out because part of vacation was driving. Sorry, my palette looks weird, and I'm trying to figure out. Oh, no, I know why. Okay, sorry. Got distracted by a mystery. So I started physical therapy last week, so I'm gonna give a shot at going back to some of my old, life activities like this, and I have them to consult with if things aren't going great, so they can tell me if I'm doing too much, I need to do more, whatever. I mean, I'm sure that there will be days when I am not feeling great because of the exercises, because it's good PT if you don't, if it hurts. That's how you know it's good PT. No. Bryce is asking if I have any Reapercon entries to share, and I don't know if I'm going to have any Reapercon entries. I have barely painted this year. Just the couple of things I did for Ron, and then with the back thing, I just feel like my life's been disrupted, out of flow. I don't know how I'd put it. Like since last Reapercon, like I got home from last Reapercon, I got sick, and I got well for a little while, but I was like, okay, I'm going to put painting on the back burner because there's all these life things that I feel like I want to focus on for a while, and that lasted for like January, maybe part of February, and then just everything, I don't know, it all fell apart. I got sick again, and then the back thing started again. So, I mean, there was the back thing in November, and then it started again, like at the end of May. And I'd been kind of babying it because I knew we were taking this car trip, and I'm the only driver, so I have to just sit there and drive, even though it wasn't like a long trip. But, it was something we were really looking forward to, so I wanted to make sure that I could do that. So, I am debating with myself whether either of the two things that I've painted for Ron is sufficiently awesome as to be put in the contest, which I often do put. I very rarely paint like special contest entries. I usually just put things I've painted in, but it is a smaller selection than usual, and I don't know if it's like amazing or whatever. Because being in the MSP medalist group, if what I put in doesn't place at gold, I will not receive any medal, which would maybe be embarrassing. But I mean, like Bryce is saying, life gets crazy sometimes, and things happen. Zachariah seems to know what that's like. I bet you all know what that's like. That's one of the reasons I'm being honest about it, because I feel really disjointed and out of practice with painting. I was thinking about what I wanted to do today, yesterday, and I mean a little bit on Saturday, but I was doing other stuff too. So we have our D&D game Saturday. And then I was like, I feel like I just haven't painted in so long, like I don't even know if I can do it. And it is a lot like riding a bike. Like your skills can get a little rusty, but it's not. Like I felt like I was like, which end of this do I use? So I was like, you know what? I should just sit down and do it for an hour or two tonight, and then hopefully like that'll help get me in the groove. And what I decided to do was finish up a couple things. Let's go over to another view. A couple things that I had been working on here on the stream on and off for some time. These guys were just, I just was using these to kind of test my camera color, because the last session I had intended to use the camera and do some critique of miniatures in the hand as well as photos, and I felt like it just, everything looked wrong. So it seems fine. I mean, it's not, no camera, still or video, is ever gonna look the same you know, the miniatures aren't going to look the same as if you look at them in person, but then actually everything else isn't going to look the same as it does in person either. So I worked on, this guy was done other than the eyeball, which I had been wrestling. If you've been on the stream before, you may remember that I've been wrestling with whether to paint it as a gem or an eye. And I went with an eye in the end, because it just sort of made sense. I think I fixed it. The pupil was a little smaller initially, and when I first like I did the other parts first, and then put the pupil on, and then fiddled around a little more. But when I first started, like he got to looking like an eye, I felt like I should put a piece of paper in his tentacle, and he's like looking at his air conditioning bill, just like, what? Like, which isn't kind of the scary monster look you're going for, maybe, but it cracked me up. But I think I made him a little less utility bill nervous. And then we have this lady, who is one of the female hirelings, henchmen and hirelings, henchwomen and hirelings, which I do not think are individually named, but if I recall correctly, we have been calling her Helga on the show. And she was pretty much done, other than this rim around the bottom of the armor, a couple other little places with non-metallic metal, and the horns. I think that was all I did. If there was something else that wasn't finished on her, then it remains unfinished, and that's something we're going to have to look into. So part of the reason you look surprised is that when we look surprised, like when the face that you make when you're subscribed. Oh, thanks, Dr. Flocka Flame, has subscribed for 25 months. That is, we appreciate your continued loyalty. But he doesn't have any eyelids. So when we look surprised, our eyes go wide open, so you see white around the eyeball. So that's kind of what's happening with him here, is that because there's no eyelid making the sphere smaller, he's going to look like surprised. Or is there another? Most of the other expressions, I think we crinkle our eyes or shut. Like anger, you shut them. Smiling, your cheek is pushing the eye up a little. I think disgust, because your eyebrows are drawing down towards your eyes. So I think surprise and fear are the big ones where the eyeballs are open. So if you've ever had problems with a figure that you painted, you're trying to do the eyeballs, and it's like, why does it look surprised or scared when it's not supposed to? It's probably that you don't have that dark rim that represents the eyelashes touching in quite the right place. It's okay to have some light under the eye. So it's when you can see white or light above the eye. So light under the eye is kind of, here, let's see if you can see it on me. So if you look, it actually looks pretty light right under my eye, because there's like a shelf for the lower eyelid. It's a 3D thing. It's poking out, and the top of it doesn't have the hair, and then the eyelashes start below that line. So if you're looking at someone from a little bit of a distance, that can often be one of the brightest spots on the eyes right there, because it's usually a little wet and it's reflecting light. So a little bit of light between the eyeball and the lower eyelashes can look good. It can give the eye a little bit of space. But if you put white above the eye, then they're going to look scared or surprised. Green users. Most emotions are hard with single-eyed creatures. This is true. And I'm excited that I'm going to get to see Bryce and Bob and Julie, and hopefully some of you next week. Please go easy on me if I don't match your name to your face to your online name, because that's a lot for my poor old sad brain. So give me a break. Write your name on your badges. That will help us. So the last time I was here, I went through some photos of figures that I had painted for the Bones 5 Learn to Paint kit, and gave them a critique in the style, well, probably a little more detailed than the style that you would be able to get if you go to ReaperCon and you talk to people there. But for the benefit of those who aren't going to ReaperCon, or if you're working on your entries now, like, why wait? Kind of look at them and assess them and try to incorporate some ideas now, and then get even more ideas on the feedback you do get. Which, I know that I've said this before, but just in case we have someone here who wasn't here the past few shows that I've done, don't feel like you have to wait until after the contest results are announced to get feedback, and don't feel like you only have to get feedback from your judges, or that it's like pivotal that you get feedback from your judges. There is a whole section of people called Artist Alley. Bryce will be there, I'll be there. Lots of painters, and they're also sculptors if you've entered the open and you want feedback on your sculpting. So Bob and Julie and a lot of other great sculptors are going to be there. And we're there from the beginning. Like, we're there from, Thursday at noon or whenever it is that it opens. If you want to make sure that you get your feedback and you're not stuck in the line on Sunday morning, or your teacher, your judge isn't there because they're off teaching a class, ask in advance. Like, you're not, if someone gives you such detailed feedback that they feel they cannot fairly assess your entry, if they end up as one of your judges, we have, not stand-in judges, we have additional people, so that whenever someone is concerned about bias, like judging your own miniature, for example, I will probably judge painter's category. I will not be able to judge my own miniature should I manage to put one in. There will be someone who will step in my place, so that the team still has 3 judges. So don't wait. Get your feedback in advance. And it doesn't have, like, if you have multiple miniatures and you're not putting them all in the contest, or you have one that you're especially interested in. Last year we had people who, they entered one miniature and then had other miniatures in their display, but they were marked for display only, so that the judges weren't supposed to look at them. And I assume that was because they really wanted feedback on that one. Well, even after the you don't have to ask for feedback on the one that we judged. If you were hoping to get feedback on another one, like, feel free, show us a couple. Sometimes it's helpful to see multiple pieces and get kind of a broader view of someone's style and where they are in the hobby and stuff like that. So don't wait. Feel free to show us the thing we didn't judge, and I don't know, have fun. Hopefully you are working on your entries, and if not, there's still time to work on your entries. All right, so let's switch back to this view. Which one will I do first? What a good question. Maybe I will do her. So, and I will probably be a little more thorough than I would be at ReaperCon, because I have the luxury of doing that. I don't have a bunch of people waiting in a line. I also have the luxury of feeling free to rip myself to shreds without having to be diplomatic or anything. And please give your judges, like, we're going to try to talk about what you most want to talk about. We're going to try to do things in a diplomatic way, but it's a long weekend and we're teaching classes and we're talking to people and we're geeks, many of whom have, autism, ADHD, whatever. We're not always perfect in communication. We're trying. Just please give us the credit that we're trying, and just let us know if we're not talking about what you want to talk, or something seemed like really harsh and you don't understand why we said that. Ask for more information and we will do our best. But I think we're all reasonably good at being not horrible. I didn't get my grade thing set up right, but it is what it is. All right, so let's look at her live, and then we'll look at the picture briefly. So overall, I think this is like a decent miniature. It comes together. It's a blue, red, yellow triad color scheme. The yellow is not super strong. The yellow is like in a yellowy choice for the leather. A slightly yellowish wood, a bit of yellow there, which is fine. When you do a color scheme, you don't have to have, in fact, you should not have every color at the same saturation and every color in the same, taking up the same amount of space. Like the red is clearly the dominant one, and then, the blue is like the secondary one, and then the yellow is kind of an accent color. So that works. I think it delineates the various shapes pretty well. Like you can look at this even from a little bit of a distance. Those are the photos I forgot to. I had taken photos of these figures on a shelf to kind of give the impression of what things will look like when you have stuff on a contest shelf. Because you have to think about, like, it's not, your thing isn't the only thing in people's eye view. There's a bunch of other miniatures, and then the way ReaperCon is, we're looking at things on tables, not in a shelving unit. So you can also see everybody's, like, bright shirt and whatever else that's standing on the other side of the table. So this is one reason you think about, alternating your contrast between areas, not just, the depth of the shadows and the brightness of the highlights. But I think she works pretty well from here. Like, I think you can look at that and get a read on, in general, what type of character this is. It's a larger woman. She's a warrior. She's not currently engaged in a fight. And she's not very fancy. So it kind of conveys the hireling part as well. So I'm not displeased with that. One area where it's not as strong, let's put the pink guy out of the background for now, is I don't think there's as much attention going to the face as I'd like. And dark skin is tough that way. People who do canvas painting and photographs and stuff like that, they can do something like this. They can put a white background behind it to help draw, or a lighter background behind someone with dark skin to help make more contrast there. But we don't get a background in miniatures, so it's a little bit challenging. So what I've tried to do here is this blue, I've tried to make a little more saturated up by her face to hopefully, and also the highlights on the scale mail are focused here. Partly in an attempt to help draw attention up to her face, and then I'm hoping the lighter horns do that as well. Lipstick might help, not even lip, like giving her more red and pink in the lip, which many of us have. I did not paint the eyeballs at all, and I'm not super excited about that idea. If this were a contest entry, would I try? Probably. Because, it's good to show attention to details. On the attention to detail front, I think you can see it here, but we'll look again in the photos. There are two little stitches here, which I have not even shadowed or brought out in any way. So even if they're supposed to be the same color as this leather bracer, and those are like the straps to draw it close, I didn't really paint them. There's at least shadow on these blue stitches, but if I, maybe I want to do them in a lighter, maybe like a color like this, to help put more detail and draw attention there. That might be one way to do that. There's this thing which I never addressed. I forgot about it last night. I did have an idea for how I could try to turn that into a patch. I wouldn't have had time anyway last night. I painted for about 2 hours, and then it was getting late, and my back was like, maybe don't go too crazy with this yet. But that is absolutely a noticeable thing. You could fill it in and smooth it out as well, but that's kind of, for the painters category, prep and assembly and all that stuff is part of what, it's a small part of what's being assessed. So it's not like if this were like a super amazing miniature and it just had that, would it like totally knock it down a meta level? Probably not. But, showing care and attention to detail and hobby skills can help you get higher. If you're on the edge with one of the judges, like they're trying to decide between a bronze and a silver, an overall more polished level of finish and not having stuff like that might push that judge up to say, okay, yeah, this is silver. This person is showing some skills and some attention to detail and stuff. On the plus side with attention to detail, the texturing overall, I mean, a lot of that is the sculpt, but I've used, applied the paint in a way that brings that out. And then I added extra texturing on the leather, and I did a glaze on that with a material that happened to be like a little bit semi-gloss. or satin or something. So it has a slightly different texture or finish as well. And because it's leather, that works. In fact, if anything, maybe I want to put that same kind of material there and there to, maybe on the belt and the thing, to unify that all the leather is leather like that. Or I might want to do like a matte sealing spray to make everything uniform, and it's all just based on paint. So it's fine to use other like metallics. Like this guy has metallics, and that's relying on finish. And in fact, I'm going to talk about some more finish. And he's got the blood on the brain, which I put gloss on. It's also finished. So we're going to talk more about finish on him. But that's just not like I wouldn't like knock anyone down for having this part is slightly satin and the other parts aren't, or vice versa. Like, I'm just saying something you can think about when you're really trying to, make a person that looks like they exist in a world. Thinking about little things like that can sometimes help with that. I'm not very happy. And I definitely would not phrase this to someone, but I don't think the non-metallic metal on the helmet works as well as the rest. And that's not just a question of blending. I mean, the blending isn't amazing, but, metal isn't... Some people do non-metallic metal is very, smooth, but other people are kind of doing it in a more textured or... Because if you look at the reflections on metal, they can be quite sharp in the transitions between the dark and the light areas. So it's not even the smoothness. I just think overall it's kind of dark. Like, I don't know. I don't feel like the highlights kind of look painted on. Like it's a bit dark. I think if it were a bit lighter, it would help get the focus up here. And it just looks a little painted. This is a bit better. And this is still rough. Let me see if I can get the photo up. Look at the photo for a minute. So this is still rough. And I was doing that intentionally. This is still a little bit rough because, when I was initially painting this, I didn't make like 4,000 transitions the way I normally would. It was meant to be kind of a quicker painting technique. But even if I'm going to paint roughly, I can still put things in the right place. So overall, I think that this works. This defines the shape, that's, half a sphere. It's not perfect. There's like a little line in the middle where it can be a little lighter, but it's not, it does the job better than the helmet does. The weapon isn't great either. I think overall, I just started too dark a color. And I'm looking at this and now I'm not sure I finished the rivets last night. So I can look at that too. Let's look at the front of the helmet. Nope, that's a brain monster. And the thing with where I haven't done the eyes is a little more apparent here. But you can also see how if there was a bit of color in her lip and it was maybe reflecting just a little more light, which our lips often do, that would help as well. There's some places here on the chest and the other areas of the scale where the painting isn't like super crisp and amazing. Am I going to fix that now? Probably not, because that would take a minute. That's why I didn't do it in the first place. And then, my goal with this is the last time when I went through photos, I was looking at figures that were painted with dry brushing and washing, a little more of a beginner style, or someone who's just started painting, or someone who really focuses on tabletop painting and volume. These miniatures I was intending to be a little more, what would we look at an intermediate level? So, we can imagine that the person who painted this might not have the brush control or the patience to make every little one of those plates buttery smooth. Because I'm told that having that kind of patience is a bit crazy. Who was I talking? I was talking to somebody. I think it was the woman who assessed me for the physical therapy, and she was talking about something she'd done that was like, I don't know, painting a ceramic cup or some kind of thing where she just like totally lost patience with it and thought it was super boring. And I'm like, well, there's different kinds of patience, because there's like all kinds of things that I do not have the patience for at all, even though I will sit and paint, tiny lines and dots for hours and hours. So just because I do this doesn't mean that I am like the master of patience. It just means that I'm a little bit patient and a little bit mentally unwell. No, I'm kidding. But again, if you're not someone who wants to spend a ton of time on one miniature, like, you don't have to. We are happy to see the kinds of miniatures that I showed last week, tabletop miniatures. Like, you don't have to want to be the best in the world to be entering a ReaperCon. We just love miniatures. Everyone who's there loves miniatures. I've noticed over many years of hanging out in front of display cases and display tables and whatnot, that often the figures that people get excited about and bring their friends over to see and remember and tell stories about years later or whatever, they're not necessarily the ones that win the highest awards at the contest. People like what they like, and people can tell great stories even if they don't have the most amazing brush skills in the world or whatever. So I'm not trying to be snobby or anything like that. I'm trying to provide information for those who want it, but I am not assuming that everybody wants it or should be doing things the way I do it, because I definitely do not think that is the case. I've always had huge respect for people who do tabletop painting. Speaking of patience, I think that it requires a kind of patience that I don't have. Like, I cannot paint the same guy over and over and over. There are a few miniatures, mostly little things like cats, that I've painted, more than once. But I do not have the patience for army painting. Like, not even a little bit of the patience. And I have great respect for those who do. Let's see, I missed a couple of comments. Valander was saying that the skull structure from monocular creatures is like wings on quadrupedal dragons, a source of major arguments about the anatomy. I went to a museum of skeletons a while back. There's one in Florida. There's one somewhere else. Like, it's the same people that own them both, and I do not remember where the other one. It's like Cincinnati, or it's not like a major vacation destination like the Florida one. But it was interesting. So they had some elephant skulls, and they were also talking about how that's where the myth of the now I'm blanking. The guy that only has one eye. Centaur is what is coming in my brain, but that's not it. Okay, feel free to laugh in the chat. The one-eyed guys from Greek myth. Cyclops, thank you, Valander. That the theory is that's where the myth came from, because there's like this big hole in their skull for the sinuses. So it's not an eye socket, but if you just saw the skull and you didn't see the creature, it'd be easy to think that it was. Dacaflaca Flame has an overall project patience of about 30 hours, much over that, and I am done painting whether it is finished or not. It's interesting. So does it make a difference to you over what time span? That, like, is it 30 hours within a few weeks, or if you come back to it like 4 months later, it's still cool? I mean, as long as you haven't topped your 30 hours, you're still going to be interested. All right, get some stuff and stick her back here and see what I can address of what I talked about. The other idea I had for what I could try with her, well, a couple of ideas, is I could slightly lighten and then up the saturation on the blue to help put more focus here. And then if I use a bit more yellow on the skin highlights, which fits with the triad, that might also help, since then I'm getting my hue contrast. that was an idea that I had. But first I'm going to look at the non-metallic metal because it has been bugging me for like since I painted this figure for you guys. And I figured out what is happening. So half the time when I paint something, then I come back the next week and I say, well, this is terrible and this is what I did wrong. And I think what's happening is there's kind of you're using multiple parts of your brain to do something like this. So if you've ever had any experience with the book or the exercises from Drawing on the Right Side of the Brain, which I think a lot of us have, school teachers that end up doing some of those exercises. So I think a lot of people are at least kind of familiar with it. It's kind of a similar idea to that, not exactly. But you've got, like, say, a creative side, a very observational creative side. But the analytical left brain does stuff in art or an activity like this, especially once you have had training and experience. So for me, it's kind of like you think about writing. Part of writing is editing. And when I'm talking to you guys, the part of my brain that I use for editing is busy. It's thinking about things to say. It's explaining it. It doesn't have enough, memory bytes, whatever, left over to also be saying, oh, hey, that non-metallic metal needs to be a little bit lighter, or you didn't go deep enough in those shadows, or whatever thing like that. So I make a lot more mistakes when I'm streaming because I can't focus on catching the mistakes that I would make during the process that I normally do, which I have no problem with, because then that creates stuff like this that I can talk to you about where I haven't faked a mistake. I've genuinely screwed up, and can talk about how you start seeing that and correcting it and stuff. In answer to my question, Daka Flocka Flame, within a few weeks, if I give it a break for a few months, it resets, but I find half-painted minis lying around much more demoralizing than unpainted minis. Yeah, I agree. I have no problem with the vastness of my unpainted miniature collection. I just happen to collect unpainted miniatures as well as painting them. But seeing a lot, and that was, I really wanted to get these guys done, partly to be able to do this, but also partly to, like, have them done finally. It's like, oh my gosh, this has been roughly, forever. And I would like to get them off of that shelf and onto another shelf. I can find it hard to go back. Like, there are things that I told myself I would go back to for years that recently I've been trying to say, okay, like, either you have to really go back to this or you have to admit that you are not going back to this and get it out of here. But while I won't always be able to remember exactly what I was doing, it's not always, like, uncomfortable or impossible for me to just go, all right, let's kind of figure out what I'm going to be doing now with this instead. So I'm still not going to, worry about super blending or whatever. I just want to get the impression of the metal color being closer to like that. So still not, super shiny and fancy, because this is not the adventurer. This is the assistant to the adventurers. But less patchy and not really metal looking. And I may end up going a little lighter in some spots than I originally did, although I did take it up to white. I didn't take it up to white on all the lower down areas. I'm not being super consistent about my light source other than, roughly from above. But, when I painted this, I kind of had to decide, and I went a bit that way, but am I following that all over? No, I have not. Is that a tip for something to do if you're painting contest entries? to not do what I'm doing. I mean, to pay attention to where your light source is and paint the light and shadow accordingly. Yes, that is an excellent tip for something to do for a contest entry. Go just a little lighter still. And then I might, just to make sure that it doesn't look too painted on, I might go back over that again. But I will be trying to do that in a textured way and not a super precise way. Some of the painters I admire paint in a very painterly, is what they call it when you can see lots of brush strokes and stuff, way, but they're being super precise in thinking about where do those paint strokes go based on the position of the light. Zachariah M is the same way. Sometimes you need to pause talking or painting so I can do the other. And still has most of a 20 by 10 shed filled with boxes. I feel you're too many miniatures paint. Well, I'm not. Am I at the shed stage? There's a closet downstairs. I don't think it's 10 by 20 though, but it is perhaps more than it should be. Keep putting that pink guy in the background. Yes, and I will say that is a good tip if you're trying to learn a new skill in particular, or you're trying to do something that involves more decisions, like make color choices. There are parts of the painting process, like I usually listen to audiobooks or watch TV shows or stuff. And for the autopilot stuff where I'm doing texturing or those things that last hours, that's fine. But if I'm doing one of those thinking things, like I'm trying to assess, okay, where is this not great? Or I'm trying to figure out my color scheme or something like that, I have to turn wordy stuff off so that I can do the words in my brain and have them make sense. And I find that is also useful, like if I'm trying to, all right, I want to learn how this person does their wet blending or whatever, and I follow their tutorial. I need to sit and actually like actively focus on doing things their way. If I let myself get distracted, I'm very likely to just go, start doing whatever it is I always do. Instead of, because I have to actively remember, okay, what did they do here? How did they hold their brush? How did they mix this color? This is the pure white, so I'm being judicious. Another thing I can do with this armor is I painted this in, pure neutral grays. That was a deliberate choice at the time so that I would have this to talk about later. I can go in and do some glazes or something to add color tones, be it reflections from other things in the scene, be it just, I want more of a blue steel, which, blue's already there, so I should feel open to adding blue. Just something to make it look a little less boring neutral. And then all these little crevices and those are great places to like put some dark brown, black, maybe a little orange. Not that she doesn't take care of her stuff, but those are just like really tough places to reach. So it would be perfectly reasonable to have a little grime. So like not, rusty work type grime, but just a little, that's hard to reach and we're on the road type grime. Ooh, am I remotely staying in focus and in frame? I am not sure that I am. Out of practice. Just lightening up a few places on the band part as well. And how do I feel about it? I think it's better. I still feel like it's a little dark in some of these crevices, which will also make it hard to see if I do that kind of glaze or wash or whatever to add a little weathering and wear and tear. You know, it's not going to show up very well against near black. And these are areas that, you know, it's at the top, it's facing up. I want it shadowed, but it's going to be receiving sun. It's not like under here where, you know, the sun is coming from here. Very little sun is here. Now, I could do a reflected light if I were feeling extra fancy. Maybe I will, just, you know, as a point of discussion. But most of the time, I think you can get away with non-metallic metal not doing, you don't have to do a super obvious reflected light to make it work. But maybe this is why my non-metallic metal isn't fully awesome. All right, so I think I like that. I don't think I have a way where I can like show her next to the photograph. So we'll have to wait for a future time when I can take pictures of the new one and then put them side by side. All right, so while I'm here with this, I can look at, is there any of this stuff I want to change? If anything, it would just be making some of this a little brighter as well, again, to help get more interest closer to her face. Well, that looks, so I got some brown on an area that is supposed to be this metal. So this is not just a, do I like how the non-metallic metal thing came out? This is messiness. And certainly for starting to place at higher metal levels and improve your contest rankings overall. You know, paying attention to details, cleaning things up, that starts becoming more and more of a factor as you progress up the metal levels. Or at other contests as well. I was noticing, I did an update recently to my webpage that lists contests and shows that you can enter, or at least as many as I've managed to find to share. And I was noticing with pleasure how many contests, even at gaming-oriented shows, have switched over, or gaming-oriented conventions, have switched over to more of the show format where, you know, they assign medals. They assess every miniature and assign medals to it, not just pick out the top 3 or 5 or whatever miniatures. And it's a considerable investment of time and energy for them to do that. So it's like really, I keep banging that thing, I think. It's really nice when people who run contests are willing to spend the resources and effort that it takes to make that kind of thing happen. Because I think it's more fun, more people get feedback. More people feel like there's a point to them entering. I mean, when I first started out, my motivation was sometimes just it would make me finish things, which is nice on its own, even if the things weren't amazing things. All right, I like that better. I don't think I have any huge issues with the bitty bits. I need to still do the detailing on the stitches if I decide to do that. So the reason I like to do this kind of thing now and then is I think most of us don't go home and want to mess with our contest entries. Like, either, for me, I kind of like the record in time, or, you're pretty happy with how it turned out, even if there are ways it could be better. You're like, well, this is pretty good for me. I don't want to like mess around with it and make it worse. Whatever reason people may have to not want to go home and implement. Like, I would be more surprised at people going home and implementing feedback they got than not doing that. But I think it's helpful to be able to see, instead of, okay, well, here, I'll try doing better on the next miniature. Well, the next miniature might be completely different than this. It might be, like a green lizard man. So, like, totally different color scheme, different types of equipment, different face. It's a little apples and oranges when you're trying to make comparisons of like, okay, well, did I do some of the stuff that they suggested I do? So I think it's helpful to give people an example of what it looks like if you do the stuff that you might often get as feedback now and then. So I try to do some before and afters like this periodically, but it has been a while since I've done one. I felt like the weapon being dark was also making it like blend in with the hair too much, so that is a secondary reason why I wanted to light up the weapon. Trashorama, there's a local con here in Houston a couple weeks after ReaperCon, so I always see the same minis there. Quite funny. Yeah, it's funny if you. That's the other nice thing about shows, although I don't think all the conventions that have switched over to doing the metal style judging do this, but convention contests often have a rule of it has to be something new. Yeah, so it can't have been entered in another contest. Sometimes, I think it's less common now because social media has just really made it hard to insist on people not showing anything. But there are still some contests that are kind of like, this has to be never before seen. Some will say it can have been seen, but it can't have been published. So, like, if I painted something and Reaper put it on their website, then that's published. So it would need to be something that hadn't happened with, kind of thing. But with shows, there's usually not a rule of that nature. So you'll kind of get someone does a few good miniatures and they're going the whole circuit. Like, so you would show them for the next year or something. I sort of considered ReaperCon the end of my year because a lot of those miniatures I was, I'm going to be bringing to give to Ron, or Jim from Darksword is the other person I often paint for, and he's usually at Reaper or has a representative who will transport the miniatures to him. So that's kind of, that show was always the end of my year, and then I occasionally go to more of an historical miniatures show, but they have like a fantasy category in Atlanta in February, and that's like the start of my year. I think I'm happier with the weapon. Maybe make that a bit too light. All right, but let's look at it a bit further away. So I feel like that's standing out from the hair a little more. I probably could go even lighter, actually. The hat stands out a lot better now from the hair. But because the texture there's like some texture similarity between, you know, those curls and then like the bumpiness on the mace. It's not, you know, if it was a sword and it was, you know, long straight shapes, it would stand out already by dint of texture differences. But there is less of that here. So I need to look at using value and color and stuff for more difference. Doing a little bit of blue may help as well, since the hair is a warm color that is not blue. I think that's better. Trashorama is doing no shows for 2023. It's been hard going from 7 to 8 shows a year to 0. Yeah, that would be quite a difference. Do you mean as an attendee, or do you go, like, do you have a business where you go? Or you have, I mean, you go kind of either or. Yeah, it's been interesting getting back to it. The vacation I took was going to a little board game convention. So I've done ReaperCon now. Well, last year, we did 2021 too, didn't we? So I think I've done ReaperCon twice now, and then we'll be going back. But I still kind of feel like I'm integrating back into society after, you know, in 2019, 2018, I had done a lot of shows for me at my advanced age, at least. And I don't think I want to go back to that kind of schedule. I want to do shows or cons or whatever. Go back to having it be more fun focused than work focused, I guess, is part of it. So to limit the number of work cons I do. Which probably in general means limiting the amount of cons that I do. My husband keeps saying it'd be so nice to go back to Gen Con, and I'm like, I was kind of done when it was 40,000 people. 70,000 people is just a lot of people. My feet cannot take the degree to which things have spread out. Alright, so I saw a line when I took that photo, and I don't feel like I see it as much now. Well, maybe a little right there. Which is, if you are working on a contest entry and you have figured out the mysteries of photography at all, taking a photo before you're considering something done is a pretty good idea. You will see things in the photo that you don't see with the naked eye, which doesn't mean you have to fix all of those things, but it at least gives you, you know what's there. It gives you a perspective, and it can be a way to get fresh eyes on it too. Like you can, flip it horizontally. So, I mean, I don't think I can make my OBS do that, but so then the shield will be on this side, and it's kind of, it'll poke your eyes a little to give you a fresh look, because it's really hard to look at something you've been working on forever and ever and ever. You can never look at it with unbiased eyes, but tricks like that can help you at least jolt you into, a slightly different view of it. If you've ever done drawings, it's very useful to do that. Like you'll see, oh, look at how weird my anatomy is here. When you do that, for some reason, it just helps you spot asymmetries and stuff. Let's go ahead and go do like full white highlights on the little bitsies, just to help sell them as non-metallic metal and make them stand out a little more. The scale mail on the back is really not super exciting. I could get rid of the cat hair. I mean, that's going to be step one. But I could do, you know, a few areas that are a bit lighter to match where I did it on the bottom thing. Which, this is probably supposed to be leather anyway. I don't know. I made an executive decision. I'll let Bobby laugh at me later for my choices. So yeah, that just adds a little more visual variation. Visual variation is another kind of concept that I think is good for people who are intermediate painters to start looking at. So the idea of adding some weathering and other, you know, maybe reflected light or other colors to the gray of the non-metallic metal is another way of doing that. But not assuming that this is a uniform surface and every one of these is reflecting the light in the exact same way, which first of all, they would not be. But second of all, it's kind of dull. Like sometimes painters exaggerate some of the kind of things like that that are going on for the sake of making things a little more interesting. Something doesn't have to look real, it has to feel realistic. Most of the time when we like art, there has been exaggeration and simplification and other things where we go on feeling like it's super real, but it's not. And that's what makes it, often what makes it great art, is the artist making the choices about, okay, well, I want to emphasize this more. I want to talk about this more. All right, so the weathering thing. I mostly just have my Learn to Paint kit and the expansion sets off to the side. I did collect some of the color, like I looked up the colors I used on that guy and collected them. The pink, I think I painted with non-Learn to Paint kit colors, but I think the other things I painted with Learn to Paint kit colors. So this is a pretty good color for grime, I think. Although maybe I will add blue first. And that's not a bad. Let's do a blue color. Do I like that better? Yes, because we're going to thin it way down. No. The thing about doing this, adding in the weathering or glazing in color or whatever you want to do to non-metallic metal, is if I go over the whole area, I will be darkening the highlights I just put on. So I'm either going to need to go back and put them in, or, I mean, probably there's no or. But if you know you're going to do glazing from the beginning, you can try to over-exaggerate the highlighting a bit, knowing that the glazes will pull it back. And I do mean glazes, so can I zoom? I can zoom. So I'm gonna go pretty watery. I can always add more. It's hard to take it away. It is my philosophy. It is also my philosophy to test glazes before. See, that is actually a lot more opaque than I just want a hint of color. Do I have a previous sample? So more like that. Where's the... Okay, we're gonna not zoom out again. Or zoom in because now I can't figure out where I am. Even lighter than that, probably. So that is, I'm glad I tested because I was way off the mark. Are you going to miss doing shows, Trash Mama, or are you thinking it's going to be like a nice break, chance to relax? Not have to rush around getting ready and then you have to unpack, and it's like a whole thing. Shows take over your life. Is that still a little... We'll see. Might still be a little darker than I want it to be, or a little more opaque, but I'm going to try to not put it on the brightest highlights. And I feel like it's not really doing much of anything. Maybe I need the brighter blue. Need it for my mental and physical health, but deep inside of me, the pain of not going is real. I hope that you will enjoy the break. I know that it was like a big change for me. I mean, 2020, I was actually at a show when they announced it's a pandemic and you shouldn't go to the airport and hang around with people. I'm like, well, too late. I'm already here. But that was like the second, is that the first? It was the first or second of what was intended to be very many more shows that year. So it was like a big screech to a halt kind of thing. But it was nice to get a break from it. I mean, I miss seeing people. That's the hard part of it, is that I've now made so many friends that aren't anywhere in physical proximity to me. And I think that's what kept me going to shows. Even when I was feeling tired and stressed out, it's like, well, this is how I get to see my cool friends. I did not address the rivets there. So I'm not trying to, make it look like bam, blue. I just want to add a little variation and interest, because I think that just straight up gray is not super riveting. I perhaps did not think through where I should also put this on the outfit. So maybe we're going to make more of that and it becomes a wash. I mean, not the outfit, but the skin well. I feel like it's been a hot minute since I painted a figure that had much chainmail or scale mail or otherwise textured metal. I'm using the very precise finger method for trying to keep it off my highlights. Well, that's not very glazy, really, is it? We'll pick some of it up. I mean, there you can... Glazing can sometimes be one of those things where you're like, well, did it make any difference at all? Sometimes I like to, I'll just do half of something. And then marvel at how it made a difference, even though I didn't think it made a difference. This can be one of my favorite parts, actually, this going back and joining colors together and fiddling with colors is one of my favorite parts of miniature painting. then I'll do some of it as I go along. Like I might have done this blue part with the dirt as I go along. But I like to come back at the end once I've gotten, all the colors that I'm going to use on the miniature, and integrate a little. So in theory, I should be grabbing some of this pink and putting it in some places too, but I'm probably not going to do that. What I am going to do for kicks is, where did I put that blue? Which is Storm Chaser blue, in case anyone's wondering. Oh, wait, I did still have some. I'm going to put some in the shadows of her face. This is one of the fun things about painting darker skins, and you can do some stuff with lighter skin colors in the shadows as well. But you can end up with some surprisingly saturated colors in shadows, and it makes it more interesting and vibrant and whatnot, without looking like, oh, I put blue on her skin. Because in the same way that this metal is reflecting things from the environment, our skin does it too. It's just not as dramatic as, oops. It's not as dramatic as, a very reflective surface like metal. All right, so I got some of my blue thing on there, which is the danger of the glazes. But I'm going to look for my eraser brush and see if I can get that off. Because I just painted it, and the parts that are underneath are well set at this point. That is my hope. I can make this work. I don't know where my eraser brush is, but I think this one is a similar enough concept. And yay for success. So my eraser brush is something like this that I cut down further. So that it essentially makes the bristles a bit stiffer without actually making them like scratchy stiff. And if I think about it now, I think that eraser brush is probably 15 or even more years old. Trash is hearing that Wizards of the Coast is renting out the theater next to the Gen Con Convention Hall and showing free screenings of Honor Among Thieves all weekend. That would be awesome. I mean, even if they charged a few bucks, because, going somewhere and sitting down in the dark and resting your feet, watching a fun movie is like a thing I think would be awesome at Gen Con. I often go to back when we went, I would go to the, there's a whole movie track. And we would sneak over. I mean, you don't have to sneak. It's part of your badge. But we would step away from the games and miniatures and go do the movie thing a little bit. Sometimes in the evening, especially when there's fewer activities, or there were back then. All right, so I'm going to call the metal done. Although, oh, no, I am not, because I'm continuing to forget to paint these rivets. I painted them black yesterday, and then I never came back and did the painting the rivet part. This one is just weirdly hard to reach. Check my highlights now that I did the messing around. See if there's anywhere I need to SketchUp. And call the metal good. So now, let's see what I can do for the face. Hendrik is asking where they could stream Honor Among Thieves. I'm guessing in North America is only on Paramount, is what Trash said. My husband was very enthusiastic about it and wants to encourage a sequel, so we purchased it. So I do not know about streaming. But that sounds right. Unless they, I mean, do they still do deals with like HBO when they... Or now that everybody has their own channel, you can only see it on their own channel, which is like so very irritating. Because like, I don't want to go back to having many cable stations. I was enjoying not having that situation. I get everyone wants their little piece of the pie. But I think they don't understand what a lot of us liked about streaming. Let's see if I can go even lighter. Without it looking too silly. So I'm just doing the cloth that's close to her face. That was a really hard habit for me to break. The idea that everything has to be, you know, if there's highlights here, then the highlights have to be here and here. You know, not even just like going by the light. First I had to break the habit of just doing it like as a symmetry thing. Then going by the light and then thinking, okay, that I can cheat and make things a little bit lighter to help draw your attention, or make things a little bit darker to not. Like if this blue, you know, was on the bottom here, I would not go up as high in the highlights, and I'd probably go darker in the shadows to keep you from wanting to spend a lot of time looking down there. All right, lipstick. Or more just having color in her lips, I think. I did grab some pinks. What did I do with those? Because I don't... My reds are very red. I don't think I want that. She's got kind of a peachy thing going on. So, I mean, this alone would be, you know, a heck of a lot. So, I don't want to do that. But if I mix it with the skin tone... Hendrik has never been to Canada. I've never been to Canada since it had Netflix. And Trash says Canada has some great game stores. Which I'm happy to hear, that my old home is having fun with gaming. I mean, it's a pretty good hobby for Canadians, you know, when the weather's crap. And now that you can, kind of like, you don't have to be in person. You can do stuff by Zoom and whatnot if your friends live too far away. Yeah, I actually like it with the darker color better. So that's my tip for if you want more of a natural looking lip color. Mix it with one of the colors you're using for the skin so that you've got something that's got more red or pink or whatever color you have selected, but it's not like crazy bright or saturated. And yet that does look so much more saturated on her face. It is also lighter in value, of course. I was trying to tell if there was yet more cat hairs. Even though they cannot go anywhere near the shelf where I keep the miniatures. I'm not saying Corbin wouldn't try, but now that he's not very small, I think it is. He has to be pretty motivated to go crazy and jump on things. So unless a mouse climbs up my miniature shelf, I think I'm safe. And I am just going to use the straight up pink for the little reflection dot. If her eyes were visible, another thing I could consider is using more saturated color for eyeshadow. That can look, it looks really good with dark skin, but also is a nice way to try to draw some visual attention there. All right, so I was gonna fix the stitching and stuff on the sleeves. Do I remember what colors I used? Absolutely not. I'm pretty sure I used where'd it go? Pretty sure I used rich leather, if only as a glaze over it to add the yellow element. But I don't think I used that just straight up. What else have I got for browns? Maybe? Woodland or uniform? I'm gonna go with woodland. It's a very small bit if it doesn't match exactly. Which parts of Canada did you used to go to, Trash? Toronto and St. Catharines. No way, I'm from St. Catharines. I mean, that's where I was born. My family is from St. Catharines. And then my parents moved to Toronto when I was 9 months old. But I would go back to like St. Catharines. Sometimes I'd spend the whole summer there with my grandparents. One or the other of my grandparents. You know what? I like this better, actually. I need a darker color. The Cheese and Wine Festival, if Niagara's still doing that. That was very popular with my family. Oh, that is actually black. I'm gonna get my Buddy Blue liner. The YouTuber Gorilla Miniatures Games is from St. Catharines. And they have an excellent mini painting shop. Wow. Pendred would like to see the big star forts at Quebec and Halifax. If you go to Quebec, you have to stay in is it Frontenac? The Hotel Frontenac? It's like down in old Quebec, and I mean, I'm not sure if you can walk to the fort, but it's probably not very far. But yeah, old Quebec City is kind of the closest you can get to going to Europe. You know, old Quebec City and New Orleans. Those are like, if you can't actually get to Europe, do those things instead. Oh, that's interesting. It would appear that that brush I used may have been used for metallics, because now there is like a shininess thing here, which is weird because I don't think I ever used that brush for anything. It's a makeup brush. Does it just come with sparkles? Maybe it just comes with sparkles, which seems like a weird idea to me, but what do I know? Very little about makeup, it turns out. Wow, they bring in Viejo Master Series painting seminars. That is cool. That is very cool. Why did Canada wait to get cool until after I left? is not true. Canada was cold when I left. It's probably cooler now because I left. Yeah, I had to up the cool factor significantly. I was trying to get the line where the two halves of the bracer join as well. But I do not know if I succeeded 100%. A little more shadow under. So Bryce, I was distracted because my brain can only do so many things. Are you working on some cool entries that we can look forward to admiring at ReaperCon? Because I will be excited to see what you're coming up with. I feel like I probably didn't use white, but we're gonna, since I almost never use white. I was thinking about that. If you do use like a smaller mixing set, like I talked about on the show last year, or artist colors, that would be one of the biggest differences between how I paint now and painting that way, is that I would be using so much more white than I typically do now, because I like off whites mostly. And because I can't resist, we're just a little bit more shine in the hair. But I had said I was also going to put some of this yellow in her skin highlights, didn't I? I say a lot of things. All right. I guess I should have asked if anyone had like any questions or comments about like kind of the critique part of what I said about this figure earlier. So hopefully I won't regret this, because it's tricky to keep the highlights on dark skin to a very confined area, but it can also make a big difference. Let's just do the straight yellow. I feel like the left cheek is getting brighter than the right cheek, and I don't know why. I'll find that sometimes happens. It's just contours of the sculpt, or maybe you'll have like a little, especially in metal miniature, you get a little divot or something where you get a color that just looks like there's just this little spot that looks darker or lighter than the area around it. And you just kind of have to, go in with a little tiny brush and very conservative strokes and try to shift it in such a way that it starts looking like everything else, if it's something that I care about that much. Daka Flocka Flame. ReaperCon is about at the top of the list of cons I'd like to go to, but it's at a super busy time of year on the farm, plus my brother puts on a big pig roast every Labor Day. Well, that would be tough to miss. I have no intel on whether, ReaperCon is continuing at this date. I believe this is the last year of the previously agreed upon contract for this location. I know nothing new, if there even is anything to know. I could add a little more yellow in the horns as well. I've always liked a more yellowy kind of bone and horn than a more gray one. I mix it up sometimes, but particularly since the color scheme on this was red, yellow, blue, I thought I would just do my usual thing. Now I'm trying to remember if I mentioned anything else. Well, I guess, I mean, there are little bracer thingies there, so I probably should just, because it's just black or blue liner. Outlines, and it covers over the threads. So if I'm being persnickety, that is something to fix. At least just a little. And I think that might be it. Oh no, I never put the dirt thing that I said. And I wanted to do the blue first and then do a little bit of the dirt in the crevices of some of the armor. And I had chosen ebony flesh. Pendrake says, I would hope they'd do an extension. I have a few friends who do events where they have to negotiate with hotels. And we've done a little event, but it's just a meeting room, which is much less painful because there's very little the hotel can try to rook you into, since there's no restaurant or whatever. And hotels are very mysterious to me because it's like, okay, you know that this is going to fill rooms and make you money. Why are you being boogery about it? Is it 2 again? I don't think so. Let's get some shield. And then they, one hotel will get bought by one chain and then another chain and then another chain over the course of years. And every time that happens, it's like a new event person comes in and it's like, well, we want you to have a banquet. We want you to do this. Just make your money off the rooms, maybe, like you're supposed to. All right, that glaze stuff is probably too subtle to see on camera. I don't know. Probably it is. But even though it's subtle, it has shifted the gray away from being just plain gray. And it does end up making a difference even if you can't consciously see it. Which stuff like when you put purple or something like that in the shadows of skin will have a similar effect. Where ideally you really don't want the viewer... Like, I don't want the viewer to go, hey, she put that weird blue in the shadows of this lady's skin. But if it adds complexity and, you might not consciously detect it, but it can make it more interesting to look at, I guess is what I'm trying to say. And doing that kind of color complexity, like this guy had a lot of that. And if you weren't here when I painted this, there are several episodes on the Reaper YouTube list that have been archived, but there's like burgundy wine. I brought the colors actually. Let's see. So I started with regular green colors. This one, and what was another one? This one, I think. So like that was the initial concept, but then I put. I'm not sure if I used that sticks purple in the end. I may have, but I don't think I did. I put burgundy wine like in the crevices. There's a little pink is mixed in to the highlights here. Then there's like pink mixed with the green together to make the sucker pods. And that's a similar thing here. It looks like a sickly skin tone because green and red are color complements. So when you mix them together, you kind of neutralize it, but you can make it a little more green or a little more pink depending, or red or whatever, depending on how much of each one you put in. So that's kind of the concept behind color complexity. And it, for something like skin, you know, our skin, like, it's kind of yellowy there, it's kind of reddish there, it's kind of peachy there, it's kind of, you know, not as yellow, it's more cream there. There's like a weird, like, our skin is not a uniform color, and a lot of other natural materials are not a uniform color. Where her dress, you know, unless it's some kind of shimmery material or it's transparent and you're seeing something underneath, none of which would be appropriate for her job, it's not going to be as variated in itself, but it still could be picking up some stuff from the environment. So it could, you know, I could use maybe a little green mixed into the shadows if she's being surrounded by trees, kind of thing. So this would be, you know, something that's biological, natural, might be affected by variations within itself, and then also by lights and reflections and stuff in the environment. So all this stuff with color complexity and adding weird colors to the shadows and stuff, it seems like it's not natural or realistic, but it is actually more natural or realistic to do it than to not do it. So I guess it's probably, it's too late to start on this guy. Hendrik is wondering what this critter would do if it met zombies. Throw its air conditioning bill at them and run away. No. I assume that there are some powers emanating from this great googly starey eye. So I think he would use those. Zachariah says, depends on the age of the material, though. Older and more wear can have more variation. Yes, absolutely. Generally, it's not gonna look bad if you add more variation than if you don't. It can be, I mean, you know, if you've never done that, if you've always painted, I'm painting green, so, you know, I'm painting this green, so I'm going to use, okay, well, those two greens don't go together. There should be a gobbler green in here. So yeah, if I want to paint this green, you know, I'm going to use a green like this in the shadow, and I'm going to use a green like that in the highlight. If you're used to painting this way, it can be an adjustment. There's a variety of ways to do it, and I kind of showed some of them just now, because in some cases I applied the color separately. You know, I mixed that blue and applied it separately in areas, and then for the yellowy color, I mixed that together. You know, for her lips, I mixed things together to, yeah, I guess this is the ultimate zombie snack, isn't it? It's like, that's like the zombie Brazilian steakhouse right there. So you can explore both of those. Like, I have a friend who's a great painter, and she hates glazing. She does not understand it. She thinks it's stupid. And I'm like, oh, glaze all day, every day. So there's not just one way to get there. But trying that idea of mixing colors together. Because basically a glaze or mixing is, are you mixing things physically or visually? Because, like, you know, if I have a coat of that green and then I put a coat of this burgundy wine down, you're seeing the green through the burgundy wine if it's thin down, and your eye is mixing them together. Or I can just mix those things together and then apply them. There's like multiple ways to get there. The thing I like about glazing is I can look at the end and go, okay, well, I used that yellow there, so now I'm going to put it in the face. Where if I had not made all my color choices in advance, which I did not, I think this started with, I want to paint her coat pink. and then, you know, we figured it out together on stream where I went with the rest of it. And that is not infrequently a way that I paint. It's not ideal. I think that I get better figures when I sit down and think about which colors am I going to use, which values am I going to use, how am I going to use those to draw attention to the face. If I do that in advance, it's going to be a better figure. But in all honesty, that is not always the way that I paint. And I figure it's not always the way other people paint too, so we might as well show both kinds. So I've tried to do some on this stream of where I'm thinking the whole color thing through. Oh, thank you, Photos Mint. I hope I said your name correctly. Pendrake asks, is this a red, blue, yellow triad bit muted? Yes, 100%. The yellow is pretty muted. I mean, it's the leather and that stuff. Oh, speaking of stitches, I didn't really accentuate those stitches either. So since I already have those things out, I will do that. But yeah, so there's a little yellow in the horns. There's yellow, brown. And that's like, I did not understand that when I first started looking at color wheels and color schemes. I'm like, okay, but what if I don't want to paint a guy that's primary colors? Like, maybe sometimes I do, but maybe sometimes I don't. Like, and so eventually I realized that, oh, okay. Oh, there's my true eraser brush that does not have glitter on it, because I also did a boo-boo here. So let's see if it's too late. It might be too late. Which I will probably choose to just live with, since this was a mixed pink and I have no idea at this point what I mixed. But I could try and figure it out. Oh no, this isn't working because I'm taking paint off. Huh. Well, that is not optimal. That is unusual. I don't normally have a problem with that because I wash my minis. But I will either figure out how to make that color or create some more patches for her. I'm not sure why the top of her bag is stitched. I guess maybe if a leather piece wasn't big enough to make the whole body of the bag and the flap. Or some rude monster ripped it off and she had to sew it back on. Monsters are something that way. Sorry, I'm having to concentrate a little to... They're like kind of hard to see exactly where they are, even with my bright light and everything. I think I have just a little bit of liner. Weird color on there or something, but it will do. And those ones, you know, her hair's hanging over it and the base is hanging over it, so I'm not going to go too nuts with highlights. But I will have to figure out why that is happening. And I barely scrubbed here. I scrubbed way more over there. But it can be fixed, I'm sure. I don't know that I have the exact pinks that I used on her, because I didn't bring over any peachy colors, I don't think. But who knows? Thank you, KTC. So if you weren't here at the beginning of the stream, I will go back and find the photos. I painted this miniature. Hold on, we'll get back to her. I painted this miniature over a few different streams Unfortunately, I do not remember the names of these. And as I was painting her, I knew I was making some mistakes, or I realized, after the stream, because as I was talking about earlier, it can be harder to catch your mistakes, and there's some like the thing with the colors, some of that kind of stuff can be harder. If I'm talking, then the analytical part of my brain is already busy. So it's not looking at the miniature going, hey, that needs more contrast, or what if you put some blue here? So I often don't notice that until after the stream. I put it up on my shelf and I'm walking by it a couple times a day, and then I'm like, yeah, I don't like how that turned out. And recently I realized that happens more when I'm painting on stream because I'm talking. But if you like watching movies or listening to audiobooks when you're painting, sometimes it's good to turn that stuff off if you're in that you're making color decisions and you really need to kind of think about it, or you're trying a new skill and you need to be trying to focus on, okay, and then they said to do this, and then they did this, and this is how they mix their paint. If you have something else kind of using the analytical part of your brain, you're more likely to just fall into the habit of how you usually paint. So I will often paint things and not correct the errors as I go on the next stream, because then I can do something like this, which is I took this miniature and showed it live as well as in these photographs, and went through, if you were getting a critique at ReaperCon from the artists in Artist Alley, or you have friends or miniature painting teachers, it is often the case that we get feedback, but we don't implement it on the figures that we're getting the feedback about. And I think it can be helpful to kind of see a before and after of, okay, here's what I said, what was wrong with it, and here's my attempt to fix that. Does it actually fix anything? And to a degree, you're not going to be able to see it, side by side until I stop streaming and go take new photos and then make a composite photo with them side by side. But this was the kind of starting point for the figure today. And we'll come back here, and this is where she is now. So I lightened the overall color of the helmet. I added some highlights, mostly under her eyes, a little bit in a few other places, and I put some yellow in those highlights. I also lightened up her lip tone and put a little, I used this pink, but I mixed skin tone with it. So here, let's see again. Nope. Where's that one? I mixed the skin, so that was the pink, but I mixed skin tone with it so it was more natural looking, because I didn't want her to look like super made up. She doesn't have that kind of job description. What else did I do? I added, a little bit of dirt and some blue to the metal so it wasn't just flat gray. And I think, brought out some details. So these originally hadn't really been painted. And I lightened this and used a slightly brighter blue to help draw more attention to her face. Because I felt one of the challenges with this figure is, dark skin and dark hair. It's hard to get enough contrast to really pull the eye up here. So I was trying to use saturated colors around it, and then also increase the amount of contrast in the skin to help do that. And I think those were all the... If you want to go back after I'm finished, it'll be on, VOD for a while, and then Reaper archives all the streams on their YouTube channel. So if you miss something, or you miss the beginning and you want to go back, that is possible to do. Or if you want to go dig up the ones where I originally painted this and find out how I did the scale mail or something like that, you can do that too. Alas, they're just numbered because I'm like really terrible about waiting until the very last minute to decide what I'm going to do, and then not telling Quindy. I guess I could start trying to tell Quindy titles. I did it for like 3 episodes with Justin. I'm like, okay, here's the title, and then I just totally stopped doing that. I'm trying to make a spreadsheet for myself, and I will eventually post it somewhere, I think, or give it to my patrons or something, where it's like, okay, here's what I did in this episode. Because unlike Anne, where she's very structured and she has a sequence of miniatures that she goes through, rotates through painting until they're done, and then she starts a new one, I bippity boppity through a lot of different topics. If you haven't been here before, Anne is Ann Forrester. She's the lady who developed this beautiful paint for Reaper, and she's also an amazing miniature painter, and she has a stream here every day at 11:30 Central. I paint Monday afternoon starting at 2 p.m. Central. Yes. Thank you, Zachariah. He's putting the spelling of Ann Forster. And her stream is called RTB, Reaper Toolbox. Then Wednesdays is Luca, who's an Italian painter, and that's Miniatures Den. I think he streams on his own as well, but he streams on this channel Wednesday afternoons starting at like 1:30 Central. I'm giving all the times in Central because Reaper Miniatures is located in Texas, and that's Central Time, and that's how they do their schedule. Thursday is Josh Foreman, the Crafty Creative, and that can be painting or terrain making or anything that falls under the umbrella of creative, because that's a very accurately named show. And so those are all the like directly hobby shows, I think, unless I missed something. No Crafty Creative anymore. Okay, ignore what I just said. And then Thursday, it's every other Thursday right now, isn't it, Quindy? Is Reaper Live, where the people who run Reaper come and show off new miniatures that are going to come out and give updates on ReaperCon and the Kickstarters and kind of just your news central type of thing. And currently it's every other Thursday. Sometime, like when a Kickstarter is going or there's a lot happening, maybe as they get closer to ReaperCon, they might do it. They'll go every week. And then Friday afternoons, at a time I do not currently recall, is also like from Reaper headquarters, but it's more of a community oriented stream, and they'll show off miniatures that people painted and just kind of chat and hang out, and that's the fun friendly stream. I mean, not that Reaper Live isn't fun and friendly, plus you can win stuff, but it's more a whole bunch of news coming at you and less hanging out. Trash says, Thursday will be my show where I find things in the dumper behind the Reaper factory. You want to go in the Reaper factory to find things, because they're always like, there's some bus from like 8 years ago that we found in a corner that we're going to sell on. It's like, what is the storage system here? It's not like I haven't been there even, but it doesn't seem that. Like, it seems like it's a very organized place when I'm there, but there must be little portions of it that are a bit more like my house than I realized. So I would watch a Thursday show of Trashorama, just rampaging through Reaper looking for things. I would totally watch that. I don't know if a Thursday show is being worked on. Maybe Quindy will give us like a wink, wink, nod, nod. But all of those shows are on the VOD and then archived on the Reaper Miniatures YouTube channel in playlists. So if you're only like, I just want to find out the latest news, you can just go to the Reaper Live playlist and look for the most recently added show, and you will get some news. You won't be able to win prizes that way, but you will get some news. So I think that's it for me today. Oh, Zachariah just got a Reaper window sticker for the truck, and he's confirming that there are nooks and crannies in Reaper Central. And if you are coming to ReaperCon and it's your first time, or you for some reason haven't done this already, one of the things you can do is take a tour of the facility, and it's fascinating. Like, I have done the tour multiple times. The facility changes over time, and it's just so fun, and you learn a lot of cool things. It's like you see how the miniatures are born. It's really cool, and the paint. So even though like I've gone to the Reaper facility because sometimes the artists, ReaperCon used to be there. I've been in the Reaper facility a fair few times, but I would still take the tour again in a heartbeat if I weren't, having to teach classes and hang out and give people feedback and do judging and a bunch of other stuff that I'm hoping my back will choose to cooperate with. I think the tour, if you are interested, do they have tickets up yet, Quindy? Do you know? There are tickets, and that's to take a bus there. If you can get yourself, like if you have transportation and you can get yourself to the facility, you can go even without a ticket, I believe. Which tickets are up is what I hear. So the ticket is mainly you're paying for the transfer. Well, not paying. I think it's free. You're locking in a slot on the bus. But once everybody's there, I mean, there is going to be a size limit of how many people can wander around the rooms, but they can probably accommodate a few more people in the tour. It's just, the bus has only so much size. But yes, try to do it if you haven't done it already. It seems like you're going to be like, oh, I'm just going to look at a boring factory instead of hanging out where all the cool miniatures are and shopping and whatnot. And it's like, no, it is so fun and interesting. And it just gets more and more interesting because, like, even the first time I took the tour, all they made was metal miniatures, and just that they I don't know if they still do, probably because there's like a time thing, but they used to let someone on the tour, like, pour the metal in and make a miniature. Maybe that's a safety hazard now too. We're a little more safety conscious than we used to be. But now, I mean, it also includes the Bones USA, and I'm hoping that we get to find out something about how they're doing these mass job 3D printing. Like, I'm fascinated by this. It's like, finally, the cure to mold lines has happened. Speaking of, where is this little guy? I put him somewhere to show you. I think this is the last day for this guy, because this is July, the last day of July today, I believe. Yes. So this is the July miniature of the month, and he is 3D printed. So there's like little, there we go. You can kind of see the little nubs on the bottom of the base, and those are from the support stands. But there is much less of that. Sorry, there's like an optimal focus point. So you'll get a few little places, but it's like resin. If you've cleaned resin miniatures, it's not like soft plastic at all. You can just scrape it. It's great. I love it. I have a show somewhere where I prepped one of these that they did previously. So this is the, what the heck is his name? Honeybee Thorn something. I don't know. If you go to the front page, I bet he's there. But starting tomorrow, there will be a different miniature of the month. And can you still buy this guy after? This, I don't know. They might convert him to be Bones USA after this. I think they did. Honeythorn Knight is what Kundi said. So you can just go buy him, too, if you don't want to do the minimum purchase order. But if you do the minimum purchase, you will get this guy for free. And there's his little... He's got a stinger in the front and a stinger in the back. I would have liked to paint one, but I will have to do that. And Ron had to send me something, so he just threw a few in the box. Is why I have multiple of these. I did work on painting the lizard man that was the last month's one. Let me just roll back. No, he's somewhere else, actually. When I was trying to do my shelf shot so that you could see what, when you paint miniatures for a contest, you have to think about, people are going to see them like this first. They're going to be walking by a shelf with a whole bunch of other stuff, a shelf or a table or whatever. So you need to make something that kind of pops out here, or if you're painting for like looking at on the web or painting at, a game table is a similar situation. People first encounter it at a distance with other things competing in their visual field. And if you're looking at stuff on the web, we usually see things first in thumbnails and stuff like that, where again, it's you got to make me want to click to do this. But then I forgot to edit my shelf picture because my regular camera, the battery was dead, and I'm like, okay, so now I have to use my new camera that I don't know how to use. Trash Rama says, what if I'm allergic to bees? Can I still have him? This bee is safe for you. This bee you should get. He's the only bee that is safe for you. Well, okay, don't eat it, but don't eat regular bees either. It never turns out well for dogs to eat bees, now does it? So we should eat the honey, but not the bees. If you're allergic to bees, can you eat honey? I guess the sting and the honey are different proteins to be allergic to. I would hope you could still eat honey because it's tasty. Anyway, I'm going to let Quindy find us some other fun hobby person to enjoy on stream, because she's very good at finding us people to... Final thought. Can a vampire policeman enter your house with a warrant? Yeah, I agree with Quindy. No, you didn't issue that invitation. You can't invite a vampire to somebody else's house and have that work. That's like cheating. But you're welcome, Daka Fluffing. I should hopefully be here next week. I mean, I can feel it, but I'm not dying or anything. So I gotta remember to tuck my neck when I'm painting. Tuck your neck when you're painting. Don't. We all do this when we're looking at our phones and our computers and painting and everything. And from personal experience, I can tell you that it's eventually your neck does not like that. Oh, I don't see a rage yet. Quindy feels if there's a lien on your house, then the vampire invitation rule may be. Wow. I feel like Quindy's thought about this enough to be suspicious. We'll have to see if we see Quindy during the day in the sunlight. She's very confident about how the vampire invitation rule works. I have questions. Trust, she's a vampire policeman. I don't think she could be a vampire policeman. How does she have time to hang out and help us with streams if she's a policeman? I mean, I don't think that's the kind of job where you can pop on the computer a little bit. All right, Quindy's finding a raid for Monument Hobbies. So say hi and spread the Reaper love. And I'll see you next week. Bye, everybody.